Hi, welcome back to my channel, or welcome if it's your first time joining me. My name is Felicia and I am a knitter living in Washington, D.C. I also dabble in other crafts like crochet, embroidery, and I've been doing a little bit of sewing as well. This podcast is dedicated to my journey to becoming a more prolific knitter, but I'm also focusing on a lot of the other crafts that I enjoy and things that I enjoy making. And so I started this channel as a way to just sort of document the things that I've been working on and the things that I'm enjoying, and to share them with the people who are interested in hearing about them. If you want to keep up with what I'm doing and what I'm working on, I encourage you to subscribe to my channel. Since my last video, I've come up with a few ideas of other videos that I want to post that aren't entirely like sit down podcast style. So look out for those. First of all, I want to thank everybody who watched my last video and who subscribed and left really nice comments. It can be a little nerve-wracking to try something new, especially something like public and new. And I was just kind of overwhelmed by the amount of support that I received. I did not expect people to find my video, to watch it, subscribe, to like it, to leave comments. And there were just so many really, really positive and nice comments. And it really was wonderful to read, and I believe I've responded to every single comment that was left, and I'm still going back and checking it. So if you left a comment, I've read it and I have responded to it. But I just wanted to say on here again, thank you so much for tuning in and for being as excited about the things that I'm making as I am about making them and sharing them with you. I have not a lot to talk about, not nearly as much as I talked about on my last episode. But I do have some really fun things to share, so let's get into it. I'm going to start by talking about what I'm wearing. I am wearing a sort of modified version of the Tecumseh sweater by Caitlin Hunter of Boylan Knitworks. I knit it out of this Ecapuno yarn from Lana Grossa. I ordered it off of webs or yarn.com, which is a really, really great website to get very affordable yarn. I've ordered a lot of yarn for a lot of projects off of there, and I really do enjoy their products. And the only complaint, and it's not really a complaint, is that the shipping can be a little slow. It normally takes a couple of days after it's shipped, but it just takes a long time to process. And I know that it's a small business, so I don't fault that. It takes some lead time. But anyway, I ordered this Ecapuno yarn. It is a blend of cotton, wool, and alpaca, and it's so soft. It has incredible drape. And I used Grege for the main color, which is this color. I have some balls left. And then I used black and cinnamon. And the cinnamon is like a really beautiful burnt orange color. And I used one skein each of the black, and I might have broken into a second skein of this color, I don't remember. And then I think I used 3 or 4 skeins of the main color. Now, one thing that I did different from the pattern, a modification that I made, is I split for the sleeves a lot earlier than the pattern calls for. In the pattern, it has more of like a drop sleeve construction, and I personally don't find that to be very flattering on me. It's not very practical. I like to layer a lot of my knits with jackets or just wear them a little bit more casually. And so I found, just going through the Ravelry notes, that there was somebody who split for the sleeves a little earlier, and so that's what I did, and it was amazing. It turned out great. This was my first ever color work project, and I do think that it was a great color work starter. It was also, I think, my first ever yoke style sweater and my first time working short rows. Caitlin's pattern writing, I think, is great. Yeah, it's a great pattern. I think I want to make one. This one is short sleeved. I can take off my jacket so you can see. That just felt a little bit more versatile for me because, like I said, that just felt a little bit more versatile for me because, like I said, I like to layer my knits. It's not always super duper cold in DC, and so this is something that I can wear a majority of the year. I can wear it in fall, I can wear it in spring. It's very transitional. It's mostly cotton. I could probably also wear it in the summer if I was going to be indoors somewhere. Also, I think I knit the size 3 or 4. I know that I went up a size because when I ordered the yarn, I thought that I was ordering like a fingering weight, I mean, I thought I was ordering a DK weight. It's definitely a fingering weight. So after swatching for it and finding a gauge that I liked, it just sort of went up to get the fit that I want. So if I had knit this to be long sleeved, I think it would have been great, but I would have wanted it to be a little bit more baggy, like a little bit more sweatshirt style. I think I might try to make another one at some point. Dana from Call Me DWJ, I love all of her sweater knits. She does the most amazing, most colorful like projects. The color is not for me. Like I'm not a rainbow kind of person, but I'm so inspired by the way that she plays with color. And she did a rainbow Tecumseh where each of the colorwork sections was a different color of the rainbow. And I really like that. I would love to do that with like my own rainbow, which would still be like the colors of the rainbow, but maybe just a little bit more toned down. Hers wasn't very like primary colored, but it was still a little bit brighter than what I tend to enjoy. But yeah, so it's definitely on my list of things to remake eventually, but I'm not in a rush to make it. I think it's one of those things where I would probably be inspired by the yarn much more than the pattern. Whips. I have been working on a couple of things. Last week I talked about Brooklyn Tweed Perry yarn that I bought, but I was working on a preview knit and I couldn't discuss the project. The project has since been released, and so now I can actually show you what I've been working on, which is really exciting, and I'll talk a little bit about the project itself. The pattern is called Chabot, I think it's pronounced Chabot. I'm not 100% sure how it's pronounced. By Alma Bali, and it's a pattern for Brooklyn Tweed. I was so very excited. It's my very first time ever preview knitting, test knitting. I didn't even know the difference between a test knit and a preview knit until I started this process with Brooklyn Tweed. They have been an absolute joy to work with. I've never worked with like a yarn company or a pattern writer or anything like that. So it was really exciting to get a chance to work with them on this. And they were so communicative and just really great to work with. And they also offered a discount on the yarn. So I was able to get all of the yarn for this project at a really good price. The pattern itself is this really beautiful, like oversized dolman sleeve pattern with ribbing along the sleeve, kind of long, elongated an elongated ribbing at the hem, and then a very beautiful like V-neck. So mine is attached to yarn. Mine is scrunched up on my needles, but here it is. And, oops, let's try that again. Okay, here it is. So I still have a very long way to go, but I started working on this project a little bit before the top of the year. So I think it was the very end of December. And I did a couple things that I am kind of regretting, but I'm moving forward. So the first thing is I did not swatch. And I know that's a huge no-no, and I'm usually very meticulous about swatching, but I did not swatch for this particular pattern because the amount of positive ease that is built into it. Even at the smallest size, if I was knitting really tight, I would still get a pretty oversized top. So just kind of like dove right in. And I don't necessarily regret not swatching, but I think that my first mind was to knit a size up from the size that I'm currently knitting. And I should have stuck with that. I'm knitting the second size. I tried it on and it fits great, but it's not going to fit me the way that it fits the model in the picture, which is fine, but I'm a little bit bustier. And so I did not want a lot of extra. I don't like a lot of extra fabric and material in my bust area. I prefer not necessarily fitted, but I think if I'm going to go oversized, like 12 inches of positive ease is not going to be flattering on me and is not appropriate for every situation. So I tried it on and it fits really well. The issue is that I'm kind of tall. I'm not like lanky, but I do have like long arms. And so this doesn't quite hit the elbow, which is where the ribbing is supposed to start. It's a little bit above it. So I'm hoping that once I finish this and kind of get it, once I finish the body and kind of get it bound off, I can do a light steam block and maybe get get a little bit more in the sleeve, and then when I block it out for the final blocking, wet blocking, that I can kind of stretch out the fabric on it a little bit more. Otherwise, I absolutely love this pattern. There's a couple of things that in the pattern are not made super duper clear, and that kind of led to a little bit of confusion for me when I was working on this pattern, but otherwise it's been really, really great to work on. One thing that I did want to share is, so along the front, you'll see I have these like white, why are words so hard today? Bulb stitch markers. And then I have this grouping of bulb stitch markers clipped right here. So the portion of the pattern that I'm working on is very repetitive. I'm supposed to do something a certain number of times, and it just like keeps repeating until you're done. So what I like to do, I know people will keep like a notepad or the pattern and they'll kind of like tick off every single time they do a repeat. I personally like the rhythm of knitting, and I get very into like the meditative state of knitting. Even if I know that I have to stop and count, it doesn't take me very long to count, especially if I'm counting something like rows, which is what I would have to do for this portion. So what I like to do is take the bulb, removable stitch markers. I can link the ones that I have below. I bought a multi-pack just off of Amazon with a bunch of different colors. But I'll take that and I'll count out however many repeats I need to do. So for this particular part of the pattern, I need to do something 14 times. So I counted out 14 stitch markers and I clipped them to the top of my work. And this part I will move down as the fabric grows. I just clipped it to my work. And now every time I get to that part of the pattern, I just clip off that I've done that repeat. And then I don't have to count. I don't have to count repeats. I don't have to count on a piece of paper. I don't have to keep up with a piece of paper. I don't have to stop what I'm doing to pick up a pen, to do any of that. Literally, when I run out of stitch markers on here, I will be done with that portion of the pattern. And so for me, it helps the knitting process to go a little bit faster, and it helps it to be not mindless, but it helps me to get into a rhythm and into a groove with my knitting. And that to me is when I kind of feel the best, when I don't have to start and stop and think about it as much. So I don't know if that's something that anybody else does, but yeah, that's one of my tips for counting and keeping track of like rows and repeats. But I'm very excited to have this finished. At the rate that I'm going, I anticipate that I will probably finish the body over the weekend, and then I will start working on the sleeves. And for now, it is living in my Plystre. I think this is called the Project Pouch. I ordered this one off of Lobby NMA, but you can order them off of, there are a ton of different local places that carry these, but as part of a gift to myself for my birthday, I ordered one of these bags, and it's great. It fits so much yarn. As you can see, I have 3 skeins in there. Oops, almost lost one. I have my pattern in there. I have I have 3 skeins of yarn, my stitch markers, my pattern, and I can fit my project with the rest of the yarn in there super comfortably. So the bags are a little bit pricey, but in terms of project bags, it's definitely one of my favorites and one of the best ones that I own. When I go outside to knit, that's the bag that I like to take because it looks the least like a knitting bag. So yeah, really enjoying working on that. The other thing that I've been working on is my half and half triangle wrap by Pearl Soho as part of the Caddy Jacks knit along. I talked about all the ones that I want to make on the last episode. So if you want to hear about my plans for all of the half and half wraps that I'm going to be making in 2021, I encourage you to go check out the last video. But I did cast mine on, and the first color that I cast on is the dark denim colorway. I was actually watching Caddy Jacks, their podcast, their most recent episode, and they were talking about how they've been enjoying like looking at people's their half and half wrap on Instagram, and like the logic behind why people like cast on the first color or choose the color that they choose. And I don't have a reason. I think as soon as I saw the 2 colors, I just knew I wanted to cast on dark denim. Like I don't think I thought about it. So this is how far I've gotten. So it's very, very big. It's almost bigger than my needles. And this right here, this hex stitch marker, which, is anybody watching WandaVision? Are we talking about that? Okay, I'll talk about it later. But if you're into the MCU and you're watching WandaVision, like, let's talk. I'm back on track. This hex stitch marker is marking where I've already done the short rows. So I am doing German short rows. The pattern calls for wrap and turn, but I'm just doing German short rows. It's a little easier. This isn't giving anything away because it's a free pattern, but I'm gonna have to wrap and turn all of these stitches up until this hex. So I still have a long way to go. I'm about halfway through my first skein, and I've already wound up my second skein. And this pattern actually requires a lot more mind power than I thought that it would. I think it's the combination of the yarn and the needles. The yarn tends to slip from my needles a little bit, and so I have to like really be paying attention to it. So this one has actually become sort of my not my meditative knitting as much as I thought that it would be, but I still really enjoy working on it. I'm also kind of at the stage where progress is very slow, right? Because it's like I have to knit all the way across, short row, knit all the way back, knit all the way across, short row, knit all the way back. And there's like a little bit less of a rhythm in that. But otherwise, I've been really, really enjoying working on it. It's been fun to like watch it grow and kind of watch it take shape, because you're basically knitting an entire thing out of short rows. And so it's just very interesting to kind of watch it start to take that triangular shape. And I'm excited to get to the second skein. So those are the two projects that I have been working on very exclusively. I haven't had any time to kind of cast on a sock or do anything with that, but I'm thinking that maybe I will make some time to at least get a sock cast on. I have some sock yarn that I want to use. I kind of talked about it in the last episode. I think to just kind of get my mojo back, I might just do like a plain vanilla sock and then kind of go from there, because it's been a little while since I've knit a sock. So I don't know. We'll see if that happens. While we're on the subject of future knitting, I have decided what my next cast on is going to be, and I've ordered the yarn for it. So I'm very, very excited. I did order the yarn from yarn.com, from Webs. So I'm hoping that it'll be here in the next week and a half, and that I will be close to finished on my Chabot sweater. I will probably not be swatching for this project either. Again, because of the size that I plan to knit, I don't think that ease will kind of be an issue. So I'm very, very excited. It is a project that I talked about in my last episode. So if you watched the last episode and you want to guess which project I discussed in that video that I'm casting on next, I would love for you to leave a comment below and tell me what you think I'm going to be knitting next, and we'll see who's right. Maybe there'll even be like a little prize for the first person to guess correctly, but we'll see. So yeah, I'm very, very excited about that. That kind of like feeling you get when you like have picked your next project and you've bought the yarn and the yarn is on the way motivates me to finish what I'm working on. So like, even though I'm still really, really enjoying knitting and working on the sweater that I have now, I'm also very excited to cast on the one that I'm going to be starting soon. And so there's like this like anticipatory energy that I've been like building up around the other project. And so I'm really, really, really excited to get the yarn and feel it and make sure that it's going to be everything that I want it to be, but I think that it will be. I will share a little bit more about that when I actually have the yarn to show on the next episode. I am going to talk about sewing for a little bit, and then after that I'm going to show you some new yarn that I bought. So if sewing isn't your thing, you can fast forward through this if you want to see some of my stash enhancements. My stash enhancements include some yarn and some knitting books, so that should be exciting to see. But I do want to share sewing just because that is something that I'm also getting into. I don't know that I'll be showing a lot of sewing on here. I am by no means a sewist, and so I am learning and kind of gaining my confidence in that. And I'll show you a project that I worked on as kind of like my very first solo project. And then I'm going to talk about a couple of patterns that I've purchased that I'm very, very excited to hopefully be able to make this year for something special. I started Invisalign about a month ago. Almost a month ago. And even though I'm not really leaving the house very often, if at all, I pretty much stay at home. I'm very, very fortunate to be able to work from home and to not have to leave home to get necessities. But I still have to like go to the grocery store sometimes and run errands. And I try to do all of that in one day. And then sometimes I'll grab lunch and stuff while I'm out. So I wanted to put together a little bag that I can put all of my Invisalign necessity things in. And there are a lot of things that you need to carry around for Invisalign. Invisalign is like it's a full-time job. So I decided that I would make a bag. I got the pattern for this bag for free. I'll link the video tutorial that I used below. It is lined. I just used a muslin to line the bag. So I'm actually working on a larger bag like this too, because it's giving me practice inserting zippers, which is interesting, doing top stitching, and giving me a chance to kind of work with my sewing machine. I just got my sewing machine for Christmas, so it's new to me. It's not the machine that I learned on. I learned on my mom's machine, and her machine is a lot older. And so it's been giving me a lot of practice. I'm like brand new, and I was able to put that back together in not even a whole afternoon. So that was really, really encouraging. So when I decided that I wanted to learn how to sew, I asked my mom to teach me. My mom is an amazing, amazing sewist. She made my sister's prom dress. When I was in cotillions, she made my like attendant gowns and sewed them for other people. Like, she is an amazing, amazing sewist. And so she taught me just kind of the basics of sewing. And then I watched a lot of YouTube videos and things like that. And I have amassed a ton of patterns. As you can see, I want to share a couple that I'm really excited to hopefully make. I'm not going to be making all of these. I think that I'll probably make 1 or 2 of these this year as like a goal, because I anticipate that it will take me a little longer than like, you know, some of the amazing people that I see on YouTube who can just like bust out a pattern in a day. I'm not there yet. So one of my really, really close friends from law school is getting married this summer, and I'm hoping that I will be able to attend her wedding. It's still kind of all up in the air just because of everything going on and with access to vaccines. And I consider myself to be very, very low priority for getting a vaccine. And so I'm trying to wait for high-risk people who have to return to congregate workplaces, people who work in retail, who work in food delivery, work in food service, like those sorts of people to have access to the vaccine first. And so it's still kind of up in the air whether or not I'm actually going to be able to attend, because I won't go if I have not been vaccinated myself. So if I'm able to go, I really want to sew my outfit for the wedding. I have a vision of what I want to wear. And I have this vision of having on like a very kind of like slinky materialed jumpsuit. And so I have 4 patterns for jumpsuits, and I don't have a favorite yet, but these are some of my ideas. One person that I really, really love their style and the way they sew things is Mimi G. I discovered her here on YouTube. I follow her on Instagram. She recently launched her own like online fabric store. She's amazing. She has such dope style, and she is so creative with turning commercial patterns into amazing pieces. She also has her own pattern line with Simplicity. And so these 2 jumpsuits are ones that I have in mind. The first one is Simplicity 9142. And I like that it is 1 strap. I like that it has a sleeve. I'd probably consider making it without the sleeve and without this piece in the front. So imagine it kind of sleeveless without that. I think that might be really, really, really pretty. And then I also have the 8426, and I really just love the classic shape of this. I have a couple of jumpsuits that have this same shape, and I really, really like that shape. I think it's very, very flattering on me. And so I would love to be able to make that style. The other two that I have are by McCall's. The first one is M7789. It's like a dress and a jumpsuit combination, and it's like a bunch of different tops and then either a skirt bottom or a wide leg pant bottom. And I think that would be really sexy and fun. And I have this one from McCall's M7366. And I really, really like the cap sleeve and the pocket. I think that like ideally I would love to be able to do like a strapless pantsuit with like a wider leg, but without like a cutout right here. So I may look for another pattern. I might not, but those jumpsuits are kind of on my radar, and that's one thing that I want to make. Like I want to make a jumpsuit specifically to wear to that wedding. So that's the first thing I want to make. The other two patterns, one is Mimi G style for simplicity S9114. It's this 3-piece. And I think that this is just like such a dope outfit. I saw a sewing channel, and I'll link her the actual video below because I'm blanking on her name, but she made a really, really cute version of this. And I would love to make something like this just for like an end of summer barbecue or something like that. I think it would be really, really cute. I don't have a pattern, I don't have a fabric in mind, but this is something that I would also love to really be able to make this year. And then the last one is McCall's M7838, and it's a blouse. And I really love View C, but View B is the one that I really want to make. I really would love to be able to make either one of these. So I know that I need to find some like cotton shirting material. I really like this as like a crisp white shirt for work, but I'm working from home, and so I don't feel inclined to get dressed up right now. So maybe if there's like a reopening date for my office or something, maybe. But I just feel like that would be something really, really fun to wear, especially if I was going to like, you know, a happy hour, or sometimes we have like receptions or mixers after work. And I feel like that's something that I could wear to work and look really, really nice, but not be super dressed up. And it would be something that's very like unique and stylish, and also very classic, even though it has kind of a modern, it's like a modern take on just the plain white button up. But those are three things that I really do want to work on sewing this year. But I have to build my sewing confidence, and I didn't discuss that on the last podcast, so I just wanted to share some other things that I'm interested in working on. I have a couple of stash enhancements that I want to share. Back in the summer, one of my absolute favorite yarn dyers, Adela of Lola Bean Yarn Co., posted a picture that she was doing her interpretation of Wonder Woman's sister, whose name is Nubia. And if you don't know, Wonder Woman has a black sister named Nubia who is actually more powerful than Wonder Woman. And she is my favorite DC comic book heroine. I'm not into DC comics like that. I'm more of a Marvel girl. I'm much more into the Marvel universe. But when I saw that, I was like, I have to have that yarn. And so I set an alarm and I went in and I ordered the yarn. It was a pre-order. And I was able to pick up a skein of Nubia and a skein of Hippolyta, who is actually Wonder Woman and Nubia's mom. And I'm beating myself up because she had a third color called This Is America that was like silvery gray and like blue and red, and it really, really gave it. It gives me more of like a Marvel comic color scheme vibe, but it was so beautiful and I couldn't get my hands on it. I also am beating myself up because I only got one skein each of these, and I wish that I had gotten two of each of these, but I'm gonna figure out something to do with them. I would love to be able to use them together in the same project. I think that would be really, really nice. But I love Lola Bean yarn. I love her yarn. I have one other colorway, like a sweater's quantity of that. Her color theory is amazing. She does speckled yarn like nobody's business, and I'm not into the heavily speckled and heavily variegated yarn in terms of entire garments. I prefer tonals and things like that, but I, like a lot of people, am still just a sucker for a speckled yarn. There's just something about a bunch of colors on yarn and the imagination that it sparks in you to want to do something different or try something new or blend colors together. Like there are colors in Nubia that I wouldn't gravitate towards in terms of yarn. I wouldn't gravitate towards a red yarn, but seeing the red in here does something to me. So I may try to fill this in a little bit and maybe put together a fade. I don't know. I think fading is still pretty popular. It's something that I'm still intrigued in doing. And this is a sport weight yarn. I can't remember if it was offered as a fingering weight yarn. I think it was only offered as sport weight, but I honestly don't remember. So this is something that I ordered a while ago, but that I just got in. So this isn't like, you know, a brand new purchase, but I wanted to share that because that is beautiful. My other favorite dyer is Neighborhood Vibraco, and I've talked about them. I talked about them on my last podcast, and she did this wonderful color a while ago that was inspired by Michelle Obama, who I love. And I feel like I saw it on like Ravelry or something. And I was like, oh, that's such a pretty color. And then when the announcement came out that Michelle Obama is one of us, that she's a knitter, she reintroduced that colorway. And it's called Michelle Obama 1600 Pin. And this I actually ordered last year, maybe October, sometime, October or November. And she had it up on her website, and I kept going back and forth and back and forth. And finally she said, like, I only have a few skeins left. You have to go out there. There's like 10 skeins. Get what you can get. And I wanted to get her fingering weight. I wanted to get her sock weight yarn. But all she had by the time I got out there was her luxury lace, which is wool, cashmere, and silk, but it's lace weight. But I figured I could double it to make it closer to a fingering weight once I figure out what I want to use with it. So keeping in line with that, after the election, she introduced two new colorways, one inspired by Vice President Kamala Harris and the other one by Stacey Abrams. And I immediately was like, I have to have that yarn. I didn't care what the colors were, nothing. I was like, I want it. Then I saw the colors and I kind of wavered a little bit, but it's kind of, I don't know, limited edition gets me every time, and I just loved what it represented. And I figured that even though they're not my colors per se, that I could still turn them into something really, really beautiful. The first color is called Fair Fight. It is this beautiful, beautiful pale blue, and then it's got all these other kind of blues in it. And then I don't know if they're speckles or where the dye broke, but there's these beautiful parts that are just like varying shades of purple and red and kind of pink, and it's so beautiful. You could pick the base that you wanted to get. So I got her sock base, her studio sock base, which is a 100% merino. I didn't plan to use them for socks, so I was more so interested in the thickness of yarn, like the actual weight of the yarn. She did the color Observatory Circle, inspired by Vice President Kamala Harris. And my camera is making it a lot more red than what it is, but it's much more of like a burgundy purple color. And so I think the three of them together would be really, really, really pretty. I may have to incorporate another color or something like that depending on what the project is, but I want to use the three of these together. I think that they would be so beautiful knit up as like a shawl, or maybe even like the color work in a sweater or something like that. I bought these yarns, actually all 5 of them, with no purpose. I typically like to order with projects in mind. I'm not inclined to build a stash, but every once in a while, you know, if you love knitting and you learn to love the yarn, you see a yarn and you're like, I don't know what I'm going to do with it, but I want it and I'll figure it out. And with them being limited edition and one of a kind, I just sort of felt like it wasn't something that I could like come back to. So that's how I justified purchasing that, basically. I'm really excited that I have them. They're beautiful. So my last two this I think counts as stash enhancement. I don't know. I was talking before about Inga of Knitting Traditions, and she's working on this beautiful cable work sweater that she's just kind of freestyling, which I like admire, right? Like that's like knitting goals. And I think I had like a bout of insomnia, which I'm prone to, you know, these days because there's a lot going on. And I was going back and rewatching some of her episodes, just kind of get inspiration for a Vertices Unite palette that I'm putting together in my mind. I'm gonna put together the palette before I order the yarn this time. If you saw my last episode, you'll understand why. But she talked about this book, 250 Japanese knitting stitches, and so I bought it. It was 10 or 15 bucks on Amazon. I'll link it below. I have seen it in places like Joann and other things like that. I would also check with your local knitting store, your local yarn shop, to see if they carry it. And it is literally just a stitch dictionary. It has patterns, cables, open work with knots, with leaves, with bobbles, and it's beautiful. And I'm not to the point where I feel like I'm ready to design anything, but it's something that I do want to do. I do want to be able to like see a pattern, or not a pattern, see, you know, a sweater, or see something in nature, a design in nature, and be able to kind of replicate that in some way. Not for sale. I don't want to be a pattern writer or designer. I think that there are people who are much more talented and have a gift for that than I do. But it's kind of like any craft. Once you start to kind of get into it, you want to be able to freestyle and make it your own and work with it. And so I thought that this book would be really, really great to have for that. And then I also picked up the Vogue Knitting The Ultimate Stitch Dictionary. I was watching Christy Glass Knits, and she interviewed the editor of this book. And he was just talking about how it's literally just a book of all of these different stitch patterns, from cables to color work to lace. And I was like, that sounds really, really interesting. It sounds kind of like a one-stop shop book, which I'm kind of into. I don't want to have a lot of different books if I can have one book that kind of does everything. I pre-ordered mine on Amazon for about $30, and it's amazing. It has 800 stitch patterns, and it comes with charts and written out instructions. So I think if you have an interest in making your own items and you want to have some help in terms of like stitch patterns and things like that, that this is a really, really great book. It also has very simple cables, a lot more simple cables than the Japanese knitting stitches. So I think like being able to combine some of the like the cables with like, I think you could do something amazing with these stitches. So I highly recommend these books. They're my first ever purchase of knitting books. I normally just check out knitting books from my library, but the library has been closed and it's been a lot harder to get access to books. So it's really fun to start building my own little knitting dictionary or knitting library. If you have any knitting books that you love, any knitting reference books that you think are great, leave them down in the comments below. I definitely would love to hear some of your recommendations for books, just because I do want to build a small library, not really big, maybe 5 to 10 knitting books. As you can see, I love books. Those are just the ones you can see. I have libraries, like little mini libraries all over my apartment. So I would love to build a small knitting library as well. So that's all I have that's related to knitting and crafting and sewing. But I did want to share a couple of my favorites favorite things from the last, I would say like month, maybe or two. It just kind of feels like when you're at brunch with your friends, which I miss brunch, and you're like, oh girl, like I bought that book and I read this and I went shopping at that store, and you start to like compile your own list. And that's kind of my favorite part about watching podcasts. Like I love to see the projects and the yarn and all those things. Like we all love to see that, but I also love to see the other things that people talk about. So if you will indulge me, I'd like to share some of my favorites from the last couple of months. And I hope that you see something that sparks your interest and that you might want to go and check out. So I really enjoy entertaining. Not now, but in the before times, I loved to host and to entertain. And so I was always like looking for cookbooks and recipe books that would allow me to kind of build up a little like entertainment recipe repertoire. And then as safer at home policies were put into place, I know everybody got like super duper into baking. Sorry, there's a ton of noise outside my apartment. I know that people got super duper duper into baking, and I did not. Had no interest in it. I was like, baking is hard. I can cook. I don't want to bake. And so I was experimenting with a lot of cookbooks and picking up a couple of cookbooks, which I'd be happy to share in another episode. But the cookbook that I want to talk about is the one that made me decide that I actually do enjoy baking. I used to love watching the Test Kitchen. What was the magazine? I can't think of it. Bon Appetit. Their channel was a hit like 2 years ago. They have it has since come to light that they weren't paying people of color what they deserve to pay. And so the channel and a lot of the content creators have since left. But one of the content creators who I really liked her show was Claire Sappets. She would take like a popular food item or a snack item and make it better. So she did like Pop-Tarts and Pringles, and I think she did like a Snickers bar, like all these different things. And it was just so fun to like watch her create those. Last year, she announced that she was doing a cookbook. Her cookbook is called Dessert Person: Recipes and Guidance for Baking with Confidence. I was like, I like, what she does, but it's a cookbook. And at a minimum, there will be 1 or 2 recipes that I like, which is like a terrible way to decide if you're going to get a cookbook, but it's what I did. Okay. It is a great cookbook. If you are somebody who's not sure if you're going to be into baking, or you just want kind of an all-encompassing one-stop shop recipe, like cookbook for baking, I think that this is the one. I've looked at a couple of other cookbooks just in bookstores and other places that are either too basic or too complicated or too specialized. By too basic, I mean that they have a lot of recipes that I feel like you can just Google and get. I'm just not going to pay for a recipe that I can find online. I'm not. Or they're super duper complicated and you have to have a ton of equipment and you have to be like highly skilled in baking, which I'm also not. Or they're very specific, like a recipe book on bread, a recipe book on cake, a recipe book on cookies. And I live in a small apartment, so I don't have room to have like 12 different cookbooks just to be able to bake. This cookbook is perfect. It has recipes for loaf cakes and single layer cakes, pies and tarts, bars and cookies, layer cakes and fancy desserts, breakfast and brunch, breads and savory baking, and then foundation recipes, which has a lot of frostings and doughs that you can then use in a lot of the other recipes or riff off of to make your own customized recipes. The thing that I think is also really unique, I don't think I'll get in trouble for showing this, is she has a recipe matrix. And in the matrix, she breaks up the difficulty and the total time. So if you are like, I'm a beginner and I have all day. She doesn't have any beginner recipes that take all day, but if you're like, I'm a beginner and I have all day, you can say, okay, difficulty 1 and I have 2 hours. What can I make? Or if you're like, I'm advanced and I can handle a more advanced recipe, but I only have 3 hours, like what can I make in that time? And I think that's also really useful because sometimes you get into a recipe and it takes like way longer than you anticipated that it would take. And I hate when that happens. I've actually made a couple of recipes from here and they were great. The directions are great. She uses like indicators in her recipe instead of like time. So she'll say, these are the things that you want to look for. Instead of saying like, just bake it for X number of times. So I made her chewy molasses spice cookies for Christmas, as well as the minty lime bars. And they were both delicious. The minty lime bars were a little complicated to make, but it was Christmas time and we were all just baking and it was so much fun. And then I made her cinnamon roll. It's kind of a sticky roll in here and I made a few adjustments to it just based off of my own preference in terms of sweetness and things like that. But it was great. And there are so many more recipes in here that I'm super duper excited to try. So if you're in the market for a one-stop shop, kind of all in one cookbook, I highly, highly, highly recommend checking out Dessert Person. Buy it local if you can, or you can find it on Amazon. Okay, the last thing that I want to talk about, puzzles. I know that puzzles are making a comeback, especially at the beginning of Safer at Home. It was so hard to find puzzles anywhere. Like they were sold out everywhere. Growing up, my sister and I always did puzzles together. When I was in college, there was always a puzzle on the table, and me and my roommates would work on them. And so I've always loved puzzles, but I always got like the ones that you just get at like Walmart and Target, and never really had super duper nice puzzles. And when puzzles started making, their comeback during Safer at Home, I decided that I would pick up a couple of puzzles, and I have a couple of really, really fun ones, and I can link to some of my favorite ones below, but I have a couple of really, really fun ones. But there's one brand that I want to share with you that they just make amazing puzzles that are so much fun to work on. They're just complicated enough that it gives you that like brain teaser sensation, but they're not so complicated that it takes you like weeks to finish them. I personally only like 1,000-piece puzzles. I do have a couple of 500-piece puzzles if I just want to spend an afternoon working on a puzzle. The brand that I'm talking about is Cloudberries. I was introduced to this puzzle brand by a YouTube channel called Karen Makes. I will link her. I think it's Karen Puzzles now. I will link to her channel below. She does amazing content around puzzles. Even if you're not into puzzles, you should still go check out her channel. Every like rabbit hole of YouTube you find out is like a thing, and you're like, wow, I didn't know that was there. There are YouTube channels, amazing YouTube channels about puzzles, and hers I think is the best. And she did a review on this particular puzzle brand. So I went on Amazon and I found their brand, and there was only one left when I first ordered it. I have since picked up 2 more that I will maybe start today. I don't know. We're supposed to get snow in DC, and so sometimes I like to knit when it's snowing, sometimes I don't, so we'll see how I'm feeling, but I love to have a fresh puzzle sort of ready to go. So I picked up 2 puzzles recently. The first one is Flowers, and the other one is Crossroads, which is so complicated looking. I'm really, really excited for Crossroads. I don't know what it's inspired by, but I love puzzles like this that kind of have a lot going on, but where I can also kind of focus in on one thing or one area of a puzzle and kind of work on that really easily. But these puzzles are super duper great. They're so high quality. They have amazing images. They are a little pricey for compared to puzzles you might find at Target or Walmart. They're great puzzles. They're fun to put together. I will link to these puzzles, all 3 of them, if they're still available. I will link to them below. And I will also link to Karen's YouTube page where she talks about all kinds of other types of puzzles and tips and tricks. And I've gotten, even though I've been doing puzzles like my whole life, I've gotten so much better just using some of her tips. And it's validated some of the things that me and my sister have always kind of done with puzzles. So it's been really fun to get some new puzzles, because the ones that I did have were kind of old and not that great, and they frankly weren't very fun to work on. So it's been fun to have some new exciting puzzles to work on. That's it. That's all I've got today, folks. Thank you again so much for tuning in and for watching. I hope that you are having a good day. If you're not having a good day, I hope that you find a way to have a good day and that you choose happiness above all else. If you have not done so already, please subscribe to my channel. It has been so fun watching that subscriber number go up and getting to interact with people. And I want to continue to sort of build this community that I've already kind of started. And if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. It will help other people to find my video and to be able to enjoy the content that I'm creating and putting out. If you want, I will link my social media links down below. I am most active on Instagram, but I'm trying to do better with like updating and creating project pages on Ravelry. I'm terrible at Ravelry, but I'm on there if you want to follow. I do at least have my stash on there, so if you want to see yarn that I have not shown, it's on my Ravelry page. And I don't know about you, but I love like peeking into other people's stash, even more than their patterns, because I just feel like you get a sense of like what their design aesthetic is, what colors they like, things like that. So I personally love like diving into people's stash on Ravelry. So look away, honey. Don't feel bad. No judgment if you do that too. But on Instagram, I do share a little bit more of my personal life, my other things, other hobbies that I have. It is not a yarn dedicated Instagram account, so it is a way to get just a little bit more of a sneak peek into me and my life and my personality. And I do share what I'm working on over there. I do have like, you know, whips and things like that I'll post on my Instagram stories. I'm trying to get better about posting on my feed, but I'm most active in my Instagram stories. So all of that will be linked below, but I'm at Phylena on everything, on YouTube, on Ravelry, on Instagram. That's where you can find me. And I think that's it. Thank you again for watching. I will talk to y'all soon. Okay, bye. And a groove. My hair today. It's just not, yeah.